For your reaction to State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi's speeches today. I'm joined now by Nong Hong. She is the Executive Director and Senior Fellow at the Institute for China-American Studies. Thanks so much for coming in. So Wang Yi focused on the importance of multilateralism in his UNGA speech. Given that the UN is set up for that purpose, how was the message received?
I see at least there are three aspects on that. Well, first of all, it's meant to endorse the nature and also the principle of the United Nations by multilateralism. The second, it's meant to react to the ongoing tendency of the United States for working away from many of the international agreements and in its use of like protecting its own interests and also by protectionism. And the third, it's also meant to show the message China is going to support the multilateralism principle of the United Nations on many of the international affairs issues.
Yeah, and that's really the place to make that point, right? Because it's so much about what the United Nations is about. Wang Yi also said that China would not be blackmailed on trade or yield to pressure. Who is the audience for that message besides the United States?
So if we're talking about the trade, and certainly the United States, that's that I just focus on. I think the message is here, like first of all, China is willing to negotiate. Look at the fact how many rounds of negotiation or discussion on different levels on how we actually mend our difference. And the second message there is that, well, compromise and concessions is not impossible, but that has to be based on mutual understanding and mutual understanding of each other economic policy rather than pressures and blackmail. So, but in terms of other issues, the order is general. So many of the issues that China is not looking at be pressure or by blackmailing on many of these, like the South China Sea issue, that blackmail does not help at all.
Gotcha. So at the Council on Foreign Relations, Wang Yi also tried to dismiss fears that China is trying to replace or overtake the United States. Is that a message that you think the U.S. foreign policy establishment can hear?
Well, the assurance from Mr. Wang Yi to some extent might help to ease the fear, but as a matter of fact, it's up to the United States whether this argument will be convincing or not, because we look at the political environment in the United States and look at the two reports, the strategy report and also the national security report from the United States. And it's very obvious that China is pictured as one rival as Russia for the United States might. So it's very hard at this moment to convey that message, but certainly it's a little bit hopeful.
You know, in terms of addressing international problems, two of the major issues that Wang Yi focused on was the efforts to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. A turnaround is what he called it on the Korean Peninsula, and he really seemed encouraged that that was underway. But he did call for the complete denuclearization of the peninsula and also asked the United Nations and the U.S. to meet Pyongyang halfway. What support is there for lifting sanctions in China and outside of China against Pyongyang?
Well, first of all, I think the international community has come a long way to see the treatment as we see today. You're using Mr. Wang Yi's 10 round as one of the arguments. I think by the DPRK has made some gestures, like denuclearization might make different things for the United States and DPRK.
Certainly seems to.
Yeah, and the DPRK already makes some gesture, so it's time for the United States to actually meet halfway. So in order to make that happen, the economic development is very important for DPRK at this moment. So by lifting the sanction, it's very important for the United Nations, first of all, to pass a resolution, and then for other countries, and they should also focus the need of DPRK in terms of resume economic development for the sake of its people.
You're advocating a separate resolution to lift sanctions?
That's the only way to encourage. In addition to China's efforts to lift the sanction, I think a resolution is also needed too for international community to come a long way.
And then when it comes to the Iran nuclear deal, of course, Wang Yi had a tremendous defense of that deal, calling it and saying that the international nuclear nonproliferation regime will be undermined and that the authority of the Security Council will also be challenged. So China, Russia, and the EU, rather, are working out a mechanism to avoid U.S. sanctions. What's China's motivation here?
Well, I think that's exactly that Mr. Wang Yi emphasized in his speech and the multilateralism, because the Iran package deal is one of the very important products in terms of multilateralism by United Nations. So it's a very good example for China to convey to the international community that any multilateral product by United Nations should be endorsed and respected. I think that emotion to echo to his principal speech in this regard.
Thanks so much again for coming in. We appreciate your time, Nong Hong.
Thank you.